Hello, everybody, and happy Saturday. I am here today to continue the lesson and the study on Hanukkah from a Christian and biblical perspective. So, hopefully, you all were able to watch the two videos that I've already posted, just kind of leading up to Hanukkah and understanding a little bit about what's going on. So, welcome, come on in. I've got my iPhone here, so I can see who's here and what's going on. So let me go ahead and get logged in as well on my phone. Okay, perfect. All right, if you're here, give me a comment, give me a thumbs up. Tell me what you're thinking about it. Do you have any thoughts about what you've already learned? I'd love to hear about it. But today, what we're going to talk about, we're going to go right into the history of it. And I don't know about you, but I was talking to my mom today and she was like, I never liked history in school, but I'm really enjoying this. But it really helps you understand. For you to understand and comprehend what God did during this miraculous time, you've got to really know the battle that was waging and how serious it was to actually understand the battle. So let's just kind of talk now. I've got my study. This is my Bible study that I am doing, that my whole family's doing. So I've got my notes and I'm going to be kind of walking through it with you guys. But like I said the other day, I can do it with everybody and we can all learn together. And hopefully we can glean something from this during this Hanukkah season. I believe that God really wants to bring some truth and some revelation to us and really just teach us something. Because right now, the times that we're living in, I mean, we just want, I don't know if you're feeling this, but I just want to hear what the Lord has to say and really grow. And this is a time of growth. So let's just jump right into history, okay? All right, so what happened during Hanukkah? Okay, so this is what's going on, the history of everything. In 336 BCE, Alexander the Great had come to power he was in the Greek kingdom of Macedonia, okay? His unprecedented military campaign and leadership united most of the Mediterranean areas, also Africa and Asia. And basically what his goal was is to make them one government and one culture. And there was so many parallels to things that we even see rising up today. During this period, the Hellenistic influence that came and continued to spread until the rise of the Roman Empire, this was just a constant mingling of culture and every single thing that the Greeks believed in. They wanted to kind of put that on the whole world at that time, and they wanted everybody to have one mindset, one worship the Greek gods. They wanted them to operate in the philosophy of the Greek philosophy, and they were very proud of their culture and their art and their way of thinking. And it was a very, very, very hard time for the Jews. It was driven, listen to this, by performance, wisdom, and one's own inner strength and false gods. And so after Alexander's death, his empire was divided, and Judea became part of the Hellenic kingdom. But about 150 years later, Antiochus came onto the scene, and he was the one that really came in and really started this war between the Jews and the rest of the world. He waged basically a campaign to go in and Hellenize. It was like Hellenization of Judah, and his goal was to just go in and attack Judah. Anybody that did not have the mindset and didn't want to come underneath the thinking of the Greek way of thinking and this world power, then they would go in, they would attack them, they would kill them, they sold them into slavery, and they did horrible things, okay? So Hanukkah's story begins about 165 BCE during the reign of Antiochus, and he was determined to expand his kingdom and solidify Hellenistic culture. And he insisted on being called, it was Antiochus Epiphanes, and that translated God made manifest. So he must have thought that he was God, and he wanted to control the world. He wanted everybody to come under his way of thinking and his reign. Okay? He used oppression, force. He was requiring everyone in the province to submit to the Greek way of living and thinking. He forbade any kind of Jewish practice, customs, or traditions. And so this was, in short, he outlined any form of Jewish worship. And really and truly, that would become his downfall, because that wasn't going to happen. Now, what happened in the culture is that there were a lot of Jews during that time frame that they just submitted and came underneath this thinking. Basically, the mindset was welcomed by most of the ancient world. So everybody was on the same page. As the Greeks were highly respected, for their art and science and philosophy and their mathematics and all of that, people, they wanted to be a part of this. And that, like I said, they were full of pride, and had a very strong desire for power. So you've got to understand what fight, what battle that these Jews were going to come against, because this was the whole world, okay? They also thought that their ways were higher, that the ways that they thought and that they believed and that their gods was the ultimate, and this was the ultimate height. And as we know it, God is saying that, anybody that thinks that they're prideful like that, pride always goes before a fall. And God said in his word, you know what, my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. And so no one can say that they're above God. And so, but many people throughout the ancient kingdoms during this time, including many Jews, adopted this mindset. So you've got to understand that not only were there the whole world, but now many Jews are also adopting this mindset, and a mixture started taking place even within their culture. So from a spiritual and a cultural perspective, many Jews traded God's plans for them to be a set apart and holy nation for a counterfeit. And in Deuteronomy, God told the Jews in Deuteronomy 14:2, he actually said to them, you are a holy people to the Lord your God, and the Lord has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples who are on the earth. And so we see that God had called the Jews, and they were to be set apart and holy, and they were told not to worship foreign gods, not to intermingle your mindset. And by doing that, they really gave in, and then that is where the major battle began. So I wanted to talk to you about, have any of you ever heard of the Maccabean battle? And you've heard, what exactly is this? This is all surrounded around Hanukkah. And so what happened is, frustrated in his goals of conquest and expansion, Antiochus turned his attention to the non-Hellenistic Jewish culture and religion, the devout ones, okay? Where he moved forward with force, marching his troops into Jerusalem. And this is where the battle got heated. And this is where you need to understand. So as we continue to talk and in these lessons, you'll see how serious this was. He killed 80,000 Jews, took 40,000 as prisoners, and sold another 40,000 as slaves. He also plundered, robbed, and defiled the holy temple. And it was really bad. I mean, he went in, he killed, the killing and the slavery and the defilement was more. I mean, there were so many horrible things that if you go back and read in the Maccabees in the first and second books, you can hear all about all the terrible things. He also went in and erected large Greek gods and idols, and actually put an idol of Zeus in the temple. I mean, this was a huge deal. Um, I mean, and Zeus is the god of the sky. He puts him in Jehovah's temple. So he sacrificed pigs, pouring their blood on the altar, and he extinguished the light of the great menorah. And he was just evil and defiled it. And see, the great menorah was to be lit with fresh oil consecrated every day. It was to be a symbol of God's light. And that is something that as we continue in this study, I know that God has got some things that he wants to unfold. And literally, I haven't even went farther than just a few chapters because I want to do this with y'all. But the menorah was to be a symbol of God's light shining through the nation of Israel as a light to the Gentiles. And all of these Gentiles see what they're coming in and they're just defiling God's temple. So when it was extinguished and the temple was raided, those who stood as the Lord's covenant people were very grieved. And you can imagine how grieved they were to see all this happening to the temple. But this is what caused this great revolt, because murmurings started happening against Antiochus, and the Hellenistic culture started to people started to just be very, very frustrated. And in response to this, though, what the Syrian soldiers, they planned a campaign to force them to come under, force them to do what they wanted them to do. So the soldiers coerced Matthias, a priest from the line of Aaron, to lead a pagan ceremony with the pinnacle moment being the eating of pig flesh. And this was just repulsive to these Jewish people. And it's so, just to think about it. Their aim was to get ahead of the revolt with this forced assimilation. However, the act of mockery, this act would go on, this one right here would be the reason that everything went down. Because God used a remnant army to resist the opposition and evil that was spreading. So you've got to realize what's going on. This is huge. This is the whole world. And then you've got Jerusalem and Judea. All right, so a remnant rose up. Matthias the priest and his 5 sons unified a small Jewish army, and they decided to rise and fight against the evil in the Hellenistic culture for the sake of religious freedom, the safety of Jerusalem, and the holy temple of the Lord. And so, as this battle continued, the high priest Matthias became ill and eventually died. But his son Judah, he became the leader of a 2,000-man army, and Judah was given the name Maccabee. So that's where the term Maccabee was first coined. And that term means hammer, and he was given that due to his strength and ferocity in battle. So the revolt became known as the Maccabean War. So understanding this and how big this was, despite the war lasting for years, and it lasted for about 3 years, the Maccabean army only having about 2,000 undersupplied fighting men versus Antiochus's well-provided for army. They even had armored horses and elephants. They had over 55,000 of them. Many of them, were all just, they had everything, the whole world could offer as far as ability to come against Judea and Israel. But here's the thing, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was with them, with this small band of this small army, allowing the Maccabean army to miraculously retake Jerusalem and the Holy Temple by the arm of the Lord. So right there, as we this is history, and it's very important to understand as we try to understand the spiritual side and the physical side of what God is saying and what is going to happen here. So Then came the cleansing time. All right, after all of this happening, now there's this major cleansing that has to take place, and the temple was fully defiled. And after they gained the victory, but the task of cleansing the temple was going to be huge. And in the middle of the process, they found the menorah, but they found that it had also been defiled. And even though it had been defiled, there was only one little vial of oil, enough for one day for them to burn, and they needed it for 8 days, and they needed more, but they didn't have enough. And so as we continue to learn more about this small amount of oil was only enough to light the menorah for a single day. And like I said, it would take 8 days for the necessary oil to keep the light burning. And I'm sure you can imagine how they felt in that moment after winning a great victory, and now they're finding that they don't have the oil that they need. But in faith, they went ahead and they lit that one day candle and began the work of cleaning up the temple and consecrating the temple. So they moved forward, they lit the menorah, and with the oil that they had, and that act of faith is literally what moves God, because without faith, it's impossible to please God, yet you can see how they operated in that faith. And amazingly, the single day's oil lasted 8 days until the new consecrated oil was ready, because it had to go through a process as well. The Lord's house was cleansed and rededicated, and the miraculous provision echoed the covenant promises God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would never leave them, nor he would never forsake them. So that is something that for us as believers, we just want to kind of understand. Okay, we had a little history lesson, and now we want to think about how it can really soak in, and we can start meditating on that. Has there ever been a time in your life where you wanted to give up, like they had just had a battle, a huge victory? I mean, it was they overcame so much, and then all of a sudden now they turn, and the sadness that they probably found or felt when they didn't have the oil to continue the process of cleaning up. The moment you are ready to quit is usually the moment right before the miracle happens. And think about that. That's so true. Have you ever been at that place where you just were like, God, I can't do it. I can't take it another. But then you just keep pushing in, and you just keep believing, and then the miracle comes. Have you ever seen God come through on a word or a promise at what seemed to be your last moment? Oh my gosh, I can tell you, I have been there so many times where, God, I need you to speak a word to me right now. God, if I've ever heard a word from you, I need to hear a word now. And God will bring something up, and it will just remind us. And I can remember one time when God did that for me, when I was in a very, very, very overwhelming place. The voices in my head were telling me all kind of things. This is over. You're going to do this. This is going to happen. And it was just, I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I couldn't see, because not only in the natural was I seeing these things happening right in front of my eyes, I was also being tormented by those thoughts of the enemy. And I can remember saying in the middle of the night, waking up and asking the Lord, I said, Lord, what is this voice? Is this you telling me this? Or is this the voice of the enemy? And sometimes it's so hard to discern the voice of God versus just these tormenting voices. But sometimes the enemy can say things that sound so God-like. You have to really have discernment. And in that particular night, I just said, Lord, I need you to speak, and I need that word right now. And it was really one of the lowest places that I have been. And I remember I just had a vision of the Lord. And it was so awesome because I've not had a vision of the Lord like this, but only once. And that was at the time that I became saved. I saw this cross, and it was Jesus on the cross. And he was just stretched out on the cross. And as I was low looking up at him, he looked at me and said, "It is finished." And the minute I heard those words, "It is finished," it was like the fear left, the darkness left, the voices left, the light of God came in, because the word says that the entrance of that word brings light and truth. And the minute truth came, the darkness had to go. And that is a miracle. The miracle of the light, of the truth of God. So I definitely have had that. And how did God's faithfulness in the situation above move you into new levels of faith? I can tell you. When I heard God give me a word, "It is finished," everything that the enemy tried to say to me for weeks and months, fear of this or that or whatever, even sickness or disease or poverty or financial attacks or this about your kids or that, I would hear, "It is finished." It was already taken care of back there on that cross. It was all finished. He's already provided everything that I need. All things have been provided that pertains to life or godliness. And so it did change my faith, and it allowed me to be stronger. Last question. In what areas of your life do you need the revelation of light, the Holy Spirit's power to be released? And that's what you want to ask the Lord for. God, give me your revelation of light as we are entering into this Hanukkah season. And it's about the light. It's about the candle. It's about overcoming battles and being victorious. It's about rededication of the temple of God, which we are God's temples today. We are the temple of the Lord. And so it's about consecrating our temple and our hearts to the Lord. So hopefully this lesson has been a good one. We are going to continue. I've got a lesson in the morning before we have our first Hanukkah lighting, our menorah lighting. And we're going to be doing that on Sunday night. And so I do have one more lesson in the morning. We're going to talk in the morning about being bold and what that means for us as believers. So you guys have a great Saturday night, and I will see y'all tomorrow.